Hello, I'm Deborah. Um, I, I want to acknowledge I was considering doing my talk from last week because unfortunately my volume went out. But I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to have my assistant edit it out. But last week, yes, today's Thursday. No, that's on Tuesday. I did a jar metaphor, which I'm Debra Wallace. Thank you for signing in. But I had talked about how I was going to not touch the jar. And I encourage, you can still skip through the middle of the last week's talk, but I did a jar demonstration to show what happens to our nervous system. And so as it sat, it did get more clear because I didn't touch it. And this is the what I'm bringing to when I do these pause and process. It's like so here you can see it's very clear. We can see through it. It's actually tinted blue. I hope to get a clear jar, but I actually kind of went with what I had. And I thought, the blue can kind of represent how we all have bias so that no matter, no matter who you are, um, like even judges, seeing that loud and clear happening, have bias because as much as we can try to be objective and put everything aside and have clarity, and that's our hope, and that's why we're sitting here. So I'm recommending and wanting to role model taking a pause so that we can connect to our innate intelligence, our sensations, our cues, so we can know what we need to move forward and live the best life possible. But that, like everybody, we all have bias. And so I kind of like that. I was annoyed at first, but then I went with it because all I had was it's just slightly blue. So, we're going to have a bias. We're at the end of the day, we all have a nervous system. I really encourage listening to my talk on the nervous system. I'm looking for my image. I did one about our nervous system. It is our master control system. And we all have a nervous system. And when life events are happening, uh, anything, I use dirt in here, anything that hasn't been processed, any negative events, emotions, things that are happening that we don't make time to process and filter, we will just get clouded. It just gets reactivated in situations. And so, again, I'm going to leave that here. You can see uh, there's my cat, Babs, who, I usually keep it up here, but that's why I had to move it because Babs likes that spot. But I've mentioned other conversations how Babs came to me, came to my sister initially after my mother passed away. Um, and my mom had a great sense of humor and actually did not like cats. Was allergic to cats, but there's a funny story that when she was in the ICU, she saw a cat, and so then the cat showed up the morning that my mother transitioned. So this is Babs. Um, but going back, actually, so that was my jar metaphor, and I actually did also forget to say in that talk. Um, and you can see a page from my book is the thumbnail. It's a little blurry, so I'm going to have my assistant work on making better images. Let me grab my book to show that it actually takes on average 20 to 30 minutes for the nervous system to settle. And that's an average. So, but 20 to 30 minutes for a nervous system to settle. And that's if nothing new happens. And so I've mentioned this in some other talks, like an emotion actually only has a shelf life for 90 seconds. So actually, if we sit through it and can stay calm, which is actually the theme of my talk, I'm going to use another metaphor. But that if we don't have any other triggering events happening or activating events happening, or negative thoughts, there's not spiraling out of other stories that are happening, that we will actually be able to move through a feeling in 30 seconds. But when we're actually got activated, like our nervous system, the sympathetic, I'm going to talk more about this, but once we perceive a threat and we have no safe place to process it, express it, or make sense of it, or if we're feeling alone, there's no one walking us through it, guiding us through it. And then we have no memory of things going well. And I address these things in lots of my talks that then we're going to get flooded. Our brain starts to get flooded, and then we can't access our smart files, our knowing right from wrong, our problem solving, and we lose connection to that. And so it takes on average 20 to 30 minutes to get calm. So actually, this is the page of my book in the thumbnail, and I even have the fun brain fact about how it takes up to 30 minutes for our bodies to process our stress response and feel calm again. This means getting from fight, flight, or freeze, that means when we're feeling unsafe, unloved, upset, disconnected, to feeling safe, loved, calm, and connected. And I love children. I work with children. I specialize working with children. Children can actually move through this much more quickly. Children. I tell everybody, we are all born so wise, so connected to our innate intelligence and wisdom. And, I often recommend we want to be more like kids. Kids are naturally present and in the moment and can move through things so much more quickly. Um, when they're not, it's often a collision of wills and power struggles, and there's a lot going on there. But in a nutshell, um, it takes 20 to 30 minutes. And that's like when we're fighting with our partners or our friends or a coworker. This is why I tell people, when you start feeling your heart rate, we all have different signals, but the basic ones are, you'll notice your heart rate, you feel warm in certain areas, your brain, you'll have a hard time thinking, or you might be thinking all over the place, or everybody has their own cues. That's an indicator that your nervous system has gone from feeling ventral, calm, connected, social, and engaged, to sympathetic, which brings out fight or flight. Um, and then that's sympathetic. And then once we're in fight or flight too long, or sometimes we've had this experience over and over again, and then we'll just go to freeze. And sometimes you can freeze early on too. There's a lot of contextual data there. There's other things that can happen that are playing, but fight, flight, or freeze are our most basic stress responses. And I have found that freeze, if once we've gotten to freeze, it can take longer to get to calm and connected. And so there's actually a little note on my page that kind of describes how our nervous system is actually like a hierarchy. So it actually goes through steps. That's kind of why I did this steps, that it has to move through the stages to get up to ventral vagal, where we feel calm and connected. So that's that. So I'm going to actually pause and ironically, and take a breath. And this is my gift that I'm offering, because I want to show how we don't need much, but we do need to take time and space to pause and process, so that we can listen to our minds and bodies and spirits and nervous system, and process things that may be blocking barriers to goodness in our life, and to make changes so that we can have improved pleasure and peace. So breathe with me. I tend to like to put my hand on my heart. I find that helpful. And their heart math is wonderful. They talk about this, but there's lots of somatic therapy reasons why this is anchoring. But notice where the breath comes in. Do you tend to notice it in your nose or breathe through your mouth? Notice where your chest rises and falls, or your abdomen? Notice where, when you're breathing, it goes. And with the pause, I think a lot of people can start to feel anxious whether they're doing it right or wrong. And I'm going to stress, there is no right or wrong, especially if you've never done this before. And it's just a moment to kind of scan. It's like you're putting yourself through a scanning machine, and you're noticing any thoughts, feelings, sensations, patterns of thinking. Um, for an example, I did not sleep in a great position last night. Actually, Babs chose to sleep in the middle of the bed, and I just kind of stayed in one spot all night, and I woke up with a backache. So I'm feeling lots of tension in my lower right back. So actually, I'm going to put my hand there, and I'm breathing in extra oxygen to that part. And I tend to close my eyes, but it's important that you do what feels right to you. I don't know what environment you're in. I'm in my lovely home office, so I feel nice and safe. But if you're doing this at lunch, which is why I'm doing this at lunchtime, because I'm hoping that um, I want to encourage people nurturing themselves, taking a break. Yes, work needs you. Yes, your children need you. Yes, lots of people need you, but you need you. And it's so important to make this time to listen to what your mind and body and spirit and nervous system are communicating to you. And it's important to know that when we're feeling any negative things, it doesn't necessarily, it's not like feelings aren't always facts, or thoughts are certainly not facts. Um, but there's themes to it. So it's like we want to pay attention and see what's coming up for us. So continue, listening to your body. Even if you get distracted, notice where it goes in that distraction. Do you start thinking about your to-do list? Do you start thinking about this problem? Those are whatever's coming up is often our brain is constantly scanning. I talked a lot about this in my talk on Tuesday. Neuroception is scanning for cues of threat and safety. And so even you giving yourself permission to pause can also be perceived as a threat, because anything new or different that you're doing is initially perceived by your nervous system as a threat because it's different. Now you're going to come in and lead, and you're going to know, okay, yes, this is different, makes sense, it's not ordinary. But your parts of your brain and parts of you are going to be scanning to say, wait a minute, you can't be pausing. You got to get this done. You got to do that. That's completely normal. And in each of these talks, I kind of build in different resources. And one that I've mentioned is called container. So if something's coming up too big, it's almost like you need to put up a container and say, you know what? This is my time to pause, eat my lunch, take a few moments for myself. If you're able to step outside, I highly encourage that. The sunroom is my home office, and it's my favorite room in the house. And I have plants, and I just feel so wonderful. I have ponds, I have nature right there, so I just see water and beauty. So that's very calming for me. But if those other things are coming up, just say, you know what, those are important, and thank you for letting me know about them. Let's put them on the side so I can take a few moments to breathe. And notice how you are sitting wherever you're sitting. Where are your feet falling? Are you wearing shoes, socks? Notice how your toes and feet feel. Notice how the clothing you're wearing. I'll often talk about our senses because that is a main component of our nervous system, is sensing and our sensations. Um, so if you feel if the clothes are rough, soft, notice the texture of the ground or what you're sitting on. If you are eating, I encourage mindfulness eating. I mean, I'm walking you through mindfulness. Mindfulness means being present in the current moment without judgment and with curiosity and compassion. So if you're eating, notice the taste. Where do you tend to chew? And, I mentioned a lot about noticing tension, but also notice where you have ease. It often takes at least 3 or 4 conscious, nurturing deep breaths before your nervous system might feel some ease. And I'm just going to show the jar again because as I started with, like, this has started to settle. You saw how you could not see clear at all. And this is what um, we're doing. Now that this is actually a little bit more quickly, as I mentioned, 20 to 30 minutes, but we can often feel some ease just by if we don't add any more stimulus or negative thinking thoughts or events or people into our space, we can get ease within moments, seconds of just connecting and breathing. And that's why I often suggest putting your hand on your heart. And there's no right or wrong in this space. And if you're noticing judgments or discomforts, again, notice it. I often add, it makes sense. If you consider events that happened maybe earlier today, or a lot of events are happening in our world, it makes sense that it might not feel possible to take this few moments to breathe. And I thank you for joining me. And if like a problem is arising, I often say if things are coming up that need your attention, things are coming up because they actually need your attention, but not everything needs your attention. So this is a time where you get to be, I'll kind of mention, like, lead from your wise connected self, and you get to choose based on your values and your intentions what matters most. Um, so for me, being calm and connected to my mind, body, and spirit is vital for me. I know what good comes from that. I've experienced the value and relief and well being from that. And so for me, I'm able to say, yes, that stuff matters. Yes, those things need attention. Yet I need attention and I need care. And so I'll often anchor back in some kind of belief like that. So it's important that you choose something that relates to you. I have another positive reframe video where I talk about how to process negative emotions quickly. And I walk us through the ABCs, which is acknowledging any thoughts, feelings, sensations that are coming up, distractions, anything. Breathing, B stands for breathing, and then C is for coping thought that feels true and specific to what's going on right now in your life. And I also want to add to that. See, I've already talked about mindfulness is about being compassionate, but it's really important to be kind to ourselves, compassionate, as well as when it's too big, we also need containers. That's where we need boundaries and containers to help us because we can't process everything in the small amount of time. And that's where I encourage definitely having good friends that you trust, seeking out other help. Because the other thing is when we pause, um, why a lot of people don't do it is because we haven't sat. So a lot can come up and it can feel overwhelming, and then you can even numb out and feel nothing. Our nervous systems are amazing, and or you can then start to feel, and then it's like, oh my gosh, you feel so overwhelmed. You're having all these overwhelming thoughts and feelings, and that's too much. And so, if that's happening to you, I just want you to know that that's an indicator that you are absolutely needing more safe space and time to process things that are not being processed. Which I'm just gonna, we'll look at this again, but I'm just gonna shake it because look, that if we don't find a way to filter it and get this out, it's just going to keep happening. Um, so I encourage that. I'm just going to share, so just as I mentioned, let's take another breath, exhale long, and just come up with a coping thought that feels true and specific about anything that might be overwhelming you or unsettling. There's a lot out of our control right now. So, a sample coping thought would be like, I can only control what I can, which is often our own behaviors, or the boundaries we set, our thoughts that we think. Although I'll say a caveat, although we can learn to control our thoughts, and it's very important to do that. Um, what our state memory and gets stuck in our brainstem. And so a lot when we get activated, that's why that gets so cloudy. So a lot of thoughts will come that aren't actually true. They feel real, and just like feelings, they feel real, but they're not all true. Feelings have function, but they're not all true. And so it's right. It's why I also encourage making this time, because so you can start to attune to your mind, body, and spirit, and start to discern what's true and what's not. Because so much we're not even doing that in here, and then just look what's going on in the greater society. Whatever we don't make time to do in here just gets projected and muddled and just mess things up out there. So it's so important to do this work inside. Um, so take another breath in, exhale long. And if there's a coping thought that feels true and specific to what's coming up in your life, I'm going to give a little bit of an example. So actually, as I'm prepping, I noticed I was feeling a little anxious and chaotic because I am getting on a plane tomorrow morning and packing. It's like, I think as I've been working with people in this setting for over almost 25 years, um, it's a common theme, packing. And it's like we pack too much. You don't know what you need. You got to condense all this. It's overwhelming. And then I also tend to work with a lot of highly sensitive people. And so, like, airplane brings up a lot. And I love teaching about the brain. And in neuroscience, there's this saying, all what wires together fires together. So, I'm also trained in EMDR. So that's why it's like when a word comes up, there's like an association which will open up like a whole neuronic material in your brain. And so, like, the thought of an airplane, what arose for me was, wow, Boeing, think about all those issues planes have had, the FAA, like all those things that are happening. That's sifting. So that's like, as I'm thinking about getting on a plane, I'm thinking about, first off, all the things I have to do in my house. I have pets. I got to prepare to go. You know, what do I pack? What I got to get done? I had to move some clients to make this work because it was kind of a last minute trip. I'm helping out a family member. Um, and then I think about, oh my gosh, going on a plane right now. I hadn't planned on going on a plane. And then I'm thinking about all the times I've lived in New Zealand, so I'll go back and forth, and that's all over ocean. So like my mind is going through all these memories of being on a plane. I remember my daughter being terrified of flying, and she was young. I mean, we've done this over the many times, and I'm just kind of playing all that's coming up. And I know on a plane ride all the time, I am uh, before takeoff. I remember learning takeoff and landing are the key points. Most of the time when you're up there, it's all good. And so I'm always saying a moment of gratitude. So I'm always, when I take off the plane, I take a moment. And when I'm about to land, I say thank you. I remind myself what a freaking miracle it is to have an airplane. Like, unbelievable, like what it can do. But I do take a moment, like this could be it. And I've talked about death a lot in my previous talks. So I do look at every day as a gift. No tomorrow is guaranteed. So that runs through me, and I like to make sure whoever the people I'm leaving, that it's left on a note of love and appreciation and goodness, and all that, because you never know. So that's running through my mind. And then, interesting enough, I do a lot of parent education. And so I kind of wanted to weave in also that this is also coming up. I have my brain has lots of information in it. Um, but there's a parent educator. Her name is Dr. Becky Kennedy, and she goes by Dr. Becky. I highly recommend you following her, but she aligns with what I recommend. But she has this metaphor about like you're on an airplane, and kids need a leader. Like if the as the pilot's announcing, that they need to make an emergency landing, when you're on the plane, for the most case, you're gonna listen. Like you need a confident leader to say, just be clear, calm, this is what we're gonna do, give direction. And if the pilot is freaking out, that's not gonna feel good. And that's kind of what parents need to do for children, and not only what parents need to do for children, but also in my work as a therapist, we're often reparenting parts of us that didn't get what we needed, um, or were very much hurt when we needed it the most. And so I do a lot of internal family systems inspired work there. And so it's like we need a leader from. So when we're calm, that's why it's so important to get calm, because then that we can, things that are not actually needed will start to separate, and we can have some more clarity, and we can connect to our core self and values, and have more confidence and compassion. Actually, in IFS, I'll talk more about this, but they have the 8 C's. You can Google that. But you need to get calm so that you can act, so that you can respond appropriately to the demands and what's happening in front of you. And so and again, I'm a systems trained, so it's like I always see everything in the it starts with you, the individual, and then every system we interact with. So they're bidirectional, everything's interacting, and it always starts with us. And so we need that self leadership within ourselves. And then we need to, if you do choose to have children, or you work with children, we need that security. And another assessment, it's so important, that confidence, that security is warm. There's empathy. You can still be firm and lead with warmth and empathy. And actually, that will be better, well received, and healthier. And so, um, if you want to look at Dr. Becky, well, you can type, lead the plane, Dr. Becky, her metaphor. It's really great how she walks through it. Um, but that is like a snapshot of what I promote and recommend, and why I want to say it's so important to pause and to listen to parts of us, because there's even there's, like, as I mentioned, there's inner children in us. There's parts of us that are younger, even adolescent age. There's these parts of us that come out. You'll notice as you're sitting and listening to yourself, you might think something, and then this other thought comes out, because our our sense of self actually mirrors, like, under anything that happens 0 to 7, we are gaining our identity through how other people see us, treat us, talk to us. They're mirroring. And so how we are treated gets internalized into our psyche. And so we can very much have parts of other people, or that sound like other people. And so the essence of pausing and listening to your nervous system is seeing what is true for you, because even though those thoughts are there, does not mean they're true for you now. And what we needed to survive does not mean to lead to thrive. So um, I promote conscious parenting, which means paying attention, noticing, because so much of what we do, like 80 to 90% is going to be default, unconscious, we're just subconscious, we're just going to do it, we're going to get in these patterns, these routines. And so it actually takes time to sit back and say, wait a minute, I keep doing this. I'm feeling this here. Like, what does that mean? Being curious. And you may still choose to do some of these things, because you might say, hey, I actually do like that. I actually think that is a good, healthy thing. I'll do some research that fits, and that's fine. But it does processing. Um, I've had the question asked, what does processing mean? And at bare minimum, it's just starting with noticing it, being just labeling it. Oh, I'm feeling angry, I'm having this thought, I'm noticing this pattern. And then I have on my website 5 steps to positive reframe, and I go much more thorough into some deeper steps. Clearly there's a lot more to processing, and that's why I recommend, especially if there's big trauma, if it's overwhelming, to have someone walk you through that. So Take another breath in and blow out. Just notice as I was talking if there's any thoughts, feelings, or sensations or memories or images that came up for you as I was talking. And maybe some things resonating. That's, like, interesting. Aha. Or, I'm not sure about that. Hmm. And the interesting thing about that is we will tend to reject anything initially that's new, even if it might be true. So just notice any resistance or no. And then I always say, take what fits and leave what doesn't. And if it needs to come back into your life again, it'll come back in your life again. So we don't have to worry about it. But if anything came up for you, pull up a container. I've mentioned in the past, mine is my camper when I was a little girl. We traveled the United States. And so I put anything that I can't quite, don't have time to process right now that came up for me. And I'll be honest, things do. Uh, that's why I wanted to show up. As I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, I'm a human who is who struggles, has anxieties, has negative events that I need to process. Uh, and as I mentioned, my mom recently passed away, and I have a lot of changes going on in my life. And so I just wanted to show that, even with my own, I think goodness, I have all the tools I have. Oh my goodness. Um, that it's a bumpy ride. There's still, actually, now I'm remembering when I taught my daughter what turbulence was. I home educated my kids, so I remember getting her hot cocoa and putting a spoon in and showing, if we put the spoon in and we spin it around, that's what turbulence is, because the plane's going through like a cloud. It's going through um, some sort of moisture or something in the environment, and we're just stirring it up like our hot cocoa. uh, there's many playful ways and fun ways to anchor and to lead. And I thank you for listening. Please subscribe or listen to my other positive reframes. And I'll hopefully get the last video edited so it's more clear. And I'll be back on Tuesday. Take wonderful care.